To you, the director of The Babe, Barry Levinson. And I believe we do have some talent. If we want to just get them to stand up and acknowledge the audience, we have Michael Wallach.
The writer.
The writer. Stand up. Stand up. Heather Donahue, a reporter playing an actress. And thank you. Stand up. The mayor.
The mayor.
So,
by the way, you're a terrific group. You really are fantastic. I mean, this is one of the first times I've actually sat through a movie that I did with an audience. So I was so kind of taken by the participation of it all, and that I had to stay and watch. Thank you.
So you were saying that the bulk of this story is based on science fact. Can you talk about what your inspiration was to tell us where it's come from?
What happened was I was approached because I come from Baltimore and did Baltimore movies and Homicide, also in Baltimore. Thank you. And so I was asked to do a documentary about the Chesapeake Bay because it's 40% dead, and it's the largest estuary in the United States. And so I said, well, let me look into it. I did some research, and I found out that PBS, they have a series called Frontline, and they did a documentary about the Chesapeake Bay, all of the problems that it has. And they did a great job, and, ultimately, when people didn't seem to be that concerned. And I said to the people who brought me into it, I said, look, I can't really do a documentary better than what Frontline did. They did a great documentary. I really don't know where to go. So I didn't do it. And a few weeks later, I was talking with Jason, who was executive producer on this. And I said, it's interesting, all the information and the facts. And like, how would you tell a story? And then that was really it. How do you tell a story? And so I thought of putting it into a theatrical form and tell the story and use the facts to support the story, to advance it, to unnerve us, to scare us, and to build it in that fashion. And then ultimately we brought Mike in, and then we began to fashion the piece from it. So it's using a lot of the information, a lot of the factual things to set it in motion and to give a credibility to the piece. I mean, you can't sit and watch a movie about facts or whatever, but you could support the piece that way, and that's really how it began.
One of the things we were talking about earlier, this year for submissions alone, I saw maybe around 15 to 20 found footage films, which were usually just that person you've never met in real life who always has the camera on all the time. And most of them were like, they're in an asylum which has been closed. It was always like just the same type of thing. But what I found, this doesn't fit into that kind of structure, because you're actually assembling a mock doc from sourced and found footage. Can you talk about your choice to use that narrative?
Well, it seemed to make sense if you want to try to tell this one story or this one event through multiple things. And because people on that given day or any day, whatever event takes place, there's always people who are videoing with their cell phones, and every form of communication takes place. So we thought, well, what happens if you just gather together and it's multiple stories and it's expansive? I know most of those sort of exist in a house, in the woods, in that. This is more expansive, and it backs up with the oceanographers weeks before. But it also required us to use various digital platforms throughout. So I think there's something like 21 different digital formats being used. So each group is using a different kind of a camera. The higher end would have been what Donna's camera would be doing, because it was for television. That would have been the higher end. And everything else we did was really low end stuff. And you're seeing it projected here on a pretty good sized screen. We didn't go to red cameras. We didn't go to any of the real high-end stuff. It's pretty, consumer products basically. I think the Canon 5D we used, which would have been one of the upscale cameras for us. And you had to kind of pick, okay, this sequence, now we're going back to the young girl, and therefore we're using the iPhone system. And for this, we're doing this. And so each character had their own camera, so you have to kind of track it.
Do you have any questions from the audience? Yes.
Yeah, I'm from that area, and people here probably don't know, but anytime you eat Purdue chicken, that's where the chicken comes from. I was wondering if you wanted to use the name and didn't get the rights to it, or did you not consider it?
I think probably too many lawsuits might. Now, they say they don't use steroids. However, somehow, in some miraculous way, that a 3-day-old chick can basically get to 6 pounds in 42 days. It used to take 6 months, but they don't use steroids. And they say, well, it's an antibiotic. And then, of course, you say, well, can we just take a look at the feed and see what it is? And no, you can't, because it's proprietary interest. So you can't even check what they're actually feeding them or what they're doing. They say that it's not steroids. But somehow that growth pattern is extremely rapid. So we couldn't use them, and we don't, because in other words, they can probably say, well, you didn't do it, wasn't this X number of tons, too many legal aspects to it. But, the chicken industry is a chicken industry. We were actually using an abandoned, chicken farm that we came upon, and the guy who used to run it was saying that the chickens, that they became so fragile, and that, for instance, if like a door slammed too loudly, like 250 chickens would die of a heart attack. That they're so fragile they could barely walk, etc. And he was telling us a lot of information just about all that. So the issue really is, this is not something that can't be corrected. If people really sat down and they really tried to work out a way to improve, we could improve it. It's not like some unknown. We know what contributes to it. We just haven't made that kind of an effort, you're not radically overnight going to change everything, but you can certainly improve upon where that is. And the Chesapeake Bay is certainly, terrible in terms of 40% debt, but there are these places all through North America that can be improved if we just gave a little extra effort. I mean, there is no reason that in the United States that the filtration system for water is a D-. There is no reason for it, other than, well, it costs too much money.
Firstly, is the movie coming out in the States before the election? And also, was it the environmental causes what brought you to make this movie?
Is the film coming out in the States before the election?
I think it begins in a slow release on November 2nd. I think here and